welcome back, everybody. Dr. Tortorelli and I are really thrilled to have you with us today and talking more about coaching around curricular resources. We do read every single comment that we get, and so we are going to try and address some of the things that people said and hope that you will feel that the comments that you gave to us are being fulfilled, and we will keep reading them. So when you have time to comment today, you can also share with us your other thoughts. So I'm going to turn it right over to you, Laura, so that you can get going, and you just let me know when you want me advancing. I'll go to the next one for now if you want. So
yeah, go ahead. Hi, everybody. It's so great to be back here with you. I'm in sort of traveling, so I'm a lot all over the place. But I've been looking forward to, I really enjoyed our meeting in August. I felt like there was really productive conversation, and I've been looking forward to getting it started again. Annie, has set up some awesome options for us to keep our community together and to keep the resources that we're sharing together. One is, this QR code that has sort of a handout that, takes us to a handout that's like a landing page for recordings and everything that we had and that we used in August, the readings, the Jamboard, the Four Corners activities, that kind of thing, and some of the resources that we used as well. So that's one option. But the second option, do you want to talk about the Wakelet, Andy, a little bit? Or do you want to, since you set it up?
That's helpful. Yes. So you will see that there's this Wakelet option, and some of you did provide some feedback and said that you've used it and it was helpful in some emails to me. Oops, that's not where I meant to be. Sorry, I'm used to having two screens. Anyhow, so thank you for that feedback. We're going to have it time for you to give some feedback again today as well. And one of the things we'll be asking you toward the end is if you think you might want to have that as an option, so that if you like this, we will be considering ways we could make this type of a resource available for you in the groups that you'll be getting put into, that you will self-select into. But I liked how with the Wakelet, you're able to build resources within it. And I'll take some time to show you more at the end, but I'll let Dr. Tortorelli get started with some more of the research pieces for us and get us into our objectives for the day, since we have more limited time with her.
Great. Well, and we are so today, and all of these breakout sessions at the end of the day on this pathway, we want to make sure that you have a chance to think about all of the new content that is being provided during the main session and how to apply that specifically to this coaching around curriculum work. So we are going to talk a little bit about bridging that asset-based approaches, and we may talk about that in future sessions as well. Then we're also going to share some of the conversations that we had with the organizational practices session that Annie and I got to go to the organizational practices event in Mount Pleasant. And one of the pieces of feedback that we did get from you after our August sessions together was that some of these things around enabling conditions and school level norms in particular, those are things that you as an individual coach can't enact by yourself, right? There's a school culture, and admin and leadership teams absolutely have to be on board and working in concert with you to make some of these things happen. So we are going to share a little bit about what we did there and give you a chance to engage in some of the same activities we asked the leadership teams to do there. And then we're going to work in groups and think about evaluating and planning around curricular resources with a focus on Essential 4, because that is another thing that came out of our feedback from August, that there is there's some particular curricular challenges in Michigan around Essential 4, and especially the new revised language that Tanya and I presented on. So we're going to make sure that in these sessions that you have time to, you don't just sit and listen to us for an hour and a half. So we do have 2 different breakout room activities where you'll get to talk to each other. When we have a group this big, we just can't have the whole level conversation on Zoom that's the same quality as you can have in those small groups. So that's our plan for today. If you want to go ahead, Eddie. And we wanted to start by connecting to the asset-based work that you've been doing all day, and thinking about how to be asset-based in your coaching, as well as asset-based towards helping teachers become more asset-based towards teachers and children. So we wanted to highlight some of the things that are already there and how this aligns really well with the essentials. In the literacy essentials, you'll notice that that one of the first things that need to be one of the first conditions, the enabling conditions listed that can support schools in high quality literacy instruction, is an asset orientation towards children families and their communities. And so that's that's something that's something that's absolutely part of the essentials and has been, and we wanted to lift that up. But there's also, you'll notice the positive relationships between and among teachers. You as a coach play a big role in that positive school climate and positive professional relationship. And we may or may not get a chance to talk about that today, but that's a big part of the setting like school culture and that asset orientation from the top down. Asset orientation is towards children and families and communities that we work with, but it's also towards the teachers and employees and, and adults in the building who have to do all of this work. And then there's opportunities for children to develop healthy identities, culturally relevant, responsive, sustaining pedagogical approaches across the day, and sufficient time for physical activity, meals, and play. And so I wanted to point this out because we talk a lot about literacy. I love to talk about literacy. We are going to talk about Essential 4, which I always want to talk about. But I don't in any way believe that the only important thing is that the kids learn their letters and sounds, right? And asset orientation is about understanding what they bring to the school space, and how that their literacy instruction can capitalize and build on that. And so we wanted to highlight that connection. Should we go to the next slide? And then we also wanted to highlight the connection to the organizational practices, the organizational practices essentials as well, where we highlighted, and as I said, Annie and I went to that session and we met with leadership teams and admins to talk about this coaching around curricular work. And we highlighted that we all share and act upon a sense of collective responsibility for curriculum implementation. It's not just about the curriculum committee that picks the materials. It's not just about the teachers. It's not just about the coach who's training and trying to get all the teachers to do it, but there's something that everybody needs to have a part of, is making sure that from the top to the bottom in a school, everyone is on board with adopting and improving the curricular materials and implementation. And then at the bottom here, you'll see we also highlighted that this revolves around shared professional trust, collective efficacy, and a sense of agency and voice. And so that's really about doing things collectively. This is when we talk about that reading first hangover, right? We want to avoid that top-down decision-making that makes teachers feel like they are just being asked to implement something without being a part of that process and part of that collective agency. So I'm going to turn it back over to Annie.
No, thank you. I love how you framed all of that and made those connections. And then Christy was just wonderful this morning, had a lot of excellent response in the chat from people. And when Laura and I did have that chance to do our presentation in September, one of the pieces that really resonated with me that I wanted to pull out was this thought about Daniel. And so I'm just going to share a quick connection with you from when I was a coach. And I am sorry if some of you heard this because you happened to be with Laura and me. I don't think many of you would have been in September, but when I watched this video and his teacher, Angela, speaking about him and really talking about how much he needed that connection with people and what a wise child he was, how much he had to bring to the space that he was and that he was in, and the fact that really having someone believe in him, and you can see it in him when he speaks in the video, that just brought so much into his life. And so when we're coaching, it can be really challenging. And what we're going to ask you to think about, not only what assets do you bring, because ironically, Laura, we just had a breakout room at protocol at the end where people had to think of their own assets they brought to a space. And so many of you, when I was kind of facilitating the breakout room and I popped in, coaches are not used to doing that. You're not used to being the ones to say, this is my asset that I bring to the table, but you really do bring so much to the table. So you want to recognize it in yourself as well as in other people, and really be trying to think, as the teacher Angela talked about, the deficit mindset and how damaging that can be. So when we think from an asset-based mindset, how powerful that can be. And we saw that come to life through the story of Daniel. So in my own experience, I think back to when I was first hired at Core ISD, and I was a literacy coach, and there were like 8 different schools at the time that I was supporting. And I was sharing with colleagues at the ISD and some other people that are in the classroom about a person who was attending professional learning with me. And said, I really just love when she's in the room. She lights up, she's always smiling and nodding. It always feels really good when I'm presenting to this person X. And so people in the room said to me, you must not be thinking of that person. You must be thinking of another person. And I thought, no, I'm pretty sure this person's name is whatever. Sorry, if you happen to be unmuted, I will mute you. I'm
I
muting
just,
you.
how did you get there? So if you go to the agenda, okay, and go to
Trying
the,
to find.
any of these, there's like a bunch of them.
There we go. Okay. Sorry. Anyhow, so when you're in a space and people come in with their own thoughts and feelings about individuals, you can kind of be made to think, you get influenced by that. So, with this one teacher, and I was speaking so positively of her, people were trying to convince me that I couldn't possibly be talking about that educator. And so I said, I really think that's her name. So I pulled up a picture of her from the website and I said, this is who I'm talking about. Who are you talking about? And they said, oh yeah, that's who we're talking about too. So that to me was just a very powerful moment, right? Because if I had listened to what everybody said, I would walk into those professional learning spaces with a much different and much more deficit-minded approach to that specific educator who I really did enjoy working with, who I felt would share with me practices that she would be sort of tweaking or swapping in her own classroom. And so I just invite you to think right now about a person in your space that either you've had a hard experience with them, and so it's really hard to go in with an asset-based mindset with that person, or you hear from other people that this person's going to be impossible to work with and really difficult. And I am not perfect in any way. I'm just gonna put that right out front because there are still people, right? Like if I know I'm going into a certain space that I have to remind myself, like, okay, what's positive could come out of this? So I'm going to ask you to think about that. And I have to put the note taker in I think it's on our resources page, actually. Laura, if you can see that, do you see on the thing, would you mind be able to throw it into the chat since I'm sharing screen on the resources page? It should say like note taker, where I left a space for you to be able to write about a commitment that you want to make. So I want you to make a commitment, Laura, and I want you to do this at the beginning of who you're going to be more asset minded about in the setting that you work in. And then think about when you'll interact with that person and then what you could do prior to that meeting to shift the interaction and the dynamics of that relationship that you have. We are going to have you share this, but not until we get into the first breakout room in a few minutes. And just for fun, I'm sharing with you one of my favorite podcasts is Hidden Brain. If you haven't listened to it before, I find it very inspiring. And this particular episode that I was linking to our literacy work and our coaching work had to do with cognitive dissonance. And it's Dr. Elliot Aronson, who happens to be 92 years old, still like sharp, so sharp. And he does a lot of speaking in this episode of Hidden Brain around cognitive dissonance theory, but as well as the hypocrisy paradigm, and sort of names examples of when we say a commitment out loud, we're much less likely to not follow through with that. And so we're going to have you kind of put this into practice, this research that he's done before, and make a public commitment to a person that you really want to be more asset-minded about today. And we're going to ask you to, again, write it down in the notes, and you'll have the link to these slides once Google let me share them so that you can get that. And so I'm going to make sure, Laura, were you able to get that into the chat for people? Because right now I don't have that pulled up. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for your support. So it should ask you to make a copy. And so now I'm going to turn things, just give you a moment. If you take 2 minutes to write down your commitment, and then we'll turn things back over to Laura. So think about who you'll be more asset-minded about. When's the next time you'll be with that person? And what you think you might be able to do to shift. And you'll share this in the first breakout room. So just take a moment to jot that down now. I'm just going to glance through. I want to make sure you have enough time, but if you were the leader of your room, could do a thumbs up emoji just to let me know you've had time to think about who this person is, what commitment you're going to be able to say out loud in your breakout room. You don't have to name names, but just, be able to say, there's a teacher, this is what I'm going to do to shift it. So hopefully I saw some thumbs up. Thank you for any emojis, or regular old school. You can just give me a thumbs up. It looks like some people are still writing. Okay, see some more thumbs up. Oh, and some great thumbs up in the chat. Thank you, thank you. Okay, for everyone who I can see, I have a general sense that you're all ready to move on. So I'm going to turn things back over to Dr. Tortorelli so she can move on to our next step about asset-based coaching.
So when I was thinking about how we can build asset-based work into coaching and help us move our literacy instruction towards equity, I came across this paper that just came out this year that is about how literacy research and other types of researchers, like people like myself, need to be asset-based in their research designs and the questions that they're asking. So this is something that applies to everybody, right? I think oftentimes we can end up being, ironically, deficit-oriented towards teachers by saying they're being too deficit oriented towards their students, but actually this goes all the way up, all the way up, right? We need teachers to be asset oriented towards their students and families, but we have to model that as instructional leaders and coaches and teacher educators, and then researchers have to model that in the way they construct and what they choose to look at in their research. And so I wanted to share this paper that came out just this year in its guidelines for asset-based research, because I think it actually brought together, for me, this particular infographic brought together a lot of the things that came up when we were discussing the equity and really relevant.
Oh, yeah.
Culturally relevant aspects of major literacy curriculum. So basically what this paper highlights is that we can get started moving towards equality, and in some cases, many research projects and instructional materials have made a move towards, around equality, starting with representation, right? And this was an issue with some of the curricula that we discussed back in August, that there were some non-male people of color in the curriculum, but it wasn't in a way that was supposed to be challenging them, right? They were to appear, but they weren't necessarily, nothing was really happening that would disrupt or change how we are portrayed in society, or the other portrayals of minoritized populations in society. So representation is good, and that's the first thing we're looking for. But what I hear from teachers that I work with, and also from actually from teachers who review for the reading teacher, is that we've got representation. We sort of understand that, but we actually are looking for ways to push further towards equity. And Montana's in this paper really highlights 3 more levels that we can think of working towards. Access is another one, providing access to resources and culturally relevant content. So diversifying our libraries, make sure that families have access to things that represent them. Again, that is just another step forward. It doesn't necessarily disrupt anything, right? It's just helping us get that representation into kids' hands. Something that I think does this really nicely is a lot of the digital text programs that I have been researching with teachers here in East Lansing and Lansing. There are a lot of wonderful books that highlight that those digital text programs provide kids with access to things that help reflect their cultures and identities in ways that sometimes a physical library can't, right? So that's another step forward. But this article really encourages us to start thinking about pushing towards empowerment and disruption. And these are really things that are highly aligned with asset-based instruction. So empowerment involves co-curation of material. So bringing families and other audiences into the discussion of what's going to be taught, right? So Annie had a really nice anecdote back in August where she shared how she had made a decision about what, the focus of her author study unit. That is something that you could do with your communities and families, right? What is something that you want to study? What is something that we could be the focus of our author study or our project-based unit? What can we do to highlight these voices and to take advantage of all the knowledge and resources that the families in our classroom have? And then we were trying to get to our breakout groups in a minute, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. But and then finally moving towards disruption, which allows us to center non-Western knowledge, prioritize authors from minority backgrounds and minority-owned publishers, and creating space for families to articulate their own stories. And this is how we start to really contribute to disrupting ideas about hierarchies in our society and about who's valuable and whose voices are valuable. And I think that any curriculum material that you purchase off a shelf is going to be moving well towards representation and access, but empowerment and disruption are things that we have to do because we have to include families when we think back to what the literacy essentials say about including family voices, centering knowledge that we might not even have, right, will involve relying on those assets of our parent communities, and making sure that we're highlighting things that are important to them. So I think that in some ways we want to find a material that's perfect, but really true asset-based instruction and culturally relevant instruction is going to respond to the kids you have in your classroom, and that'll be different in different school buildings, and it'll be different in different contexts, even from year to year sometimes, right? We have a student participating in our research study who is Haitian and speaks French as a first language, so we're like rapidly adding a bunch of connections to French language to our material so that she has so that she can use that asset to get at the materials that we want her to participate in and feel like she's fully valued and participating in that community. So I just thought that I wanted to share this with our group because it really helped me think about how materials can get us so far, but how we have to take it sort of the last mile. All right. And then we wanted to share out some of the responses from the survey that we got. I'm sorry, I'm running behind. Okay, we're going to get into our first breakout room in just a minute here. But you said that the most valuable thing of the options would be to spend time problem solving around a curricular resource. So we are going to give you guys opportunities in every one of these breakout sessions to do some of that problem solving work specific to the materials that you're using. And then if you can go ahead, Annie.
Yes, and also just those other 2 areas, right? These are the 3 areas that we are going to let people like self-select into, even though, like Laura said, we'll be really focusing today, giving you the opportunity for the problem solving piece too.
Yes, we're not dropping the other ones, but I wanted to connect back to our connecting our foundational text for this pathway, Sharon Walpole's text about curriculum plus coaching. And just remind us that we are all in different phases: exploration, preparation, implementation, and sustainment along all of these enabling conditions and school level norms. And we did share this with the organizational practices group back in September. So this is these school level norms in particular we highlighted for them. So this hopefully everyone in your leadership teams will be speaking, who participated in that at least, will be speaking the same language and thinking about these systems in the same way. Can you go ahead, Annie? And also I wanted to highlight this change, thinking about the school level norms, what's missing, what support you need, and change you need to create the pathways and start this theory of change moving forward. So as we also discussed both back in August in our session and in the organizational practices session in September, what Sharon shares about the historical roles of coaches wearing way too many hats around curricular implementation, saying that coaches have been asked to choose and develop curricular resources, develop the collaborative framework for implementation, support teacher flexibility and adaptation for student population and local conditions, curriculum training and professional development, co-planning, co-teaching, modeling, observing lessons, analyzing, interpreting student data, and implementing intervention or teaching students even using the materials. So we highlighted all of these different hats that coaches have been asked to wear, both in the Reading First era and to some extent as we've gotten the coaching role has become more prominent here in Michigan following the Read by Grade 3 law. And then we asked the leadership teams to actually think about who should be doing all of these things, right? In a functioning system like the one that Sharon's describing, as you're moving towards sustaining those school level norms and enabling conditions, who would be doing all of these things? Would it just be the literacy coach? Would it be the literacy coach in concert with the literacy team? Or would it be everyone in a school building? And so we had the organizational practices folks work together to think about what would make sense for their schools or their districts, what they think, what they need, what they thought everyone should be doing. From your perspective, we're going to ask you to think about what you think you can reasonably take on, what you need support from your leadership team and from other people in your building to do. So that's our first breakout room. Oh, here's one example. This is just an example of something that came out of that session. The coach is working one-on-one with teaching and working with their teachers and helping them helping them and supporting them. So anything that's face-to-face with teachers was what the coaches wanted to take on. But leadership team needed to be involved in all of these other big pictures decisions, like choosing and developing a collaborative framework, and supporting, creating a culture that supports flexibility and adaptation. And then everybody, which is of course different in every school, analyzing and interpreting student data to progress monitor. So Annie, do you want to get us to explain how turn us over into the breakout rooms?
Sure. So we hope that this will work for you. What I did was I built this on different sheets for you. And so you're going to get into breakout rooms, and as you get into your breakout room, I want you to pay attention to whatever breakout room number you're in. Okay, so you can see that on the slides. I'm hoping that I'm not blocking you when I, like, you know, I have all these windows open on here, but they're not. Okay, full disclosure, I'm supposed to be getting a new Mac, and today I'm feeling like I really need one because it's not even letting me move things. But what I did was I built these out as if you were doing like a sort, so that you can, in your group, just grab something and slide it where you think it needs to go. Or if there's some adjustment that you need to make to the language. For example, when Laura and I were doing it, we really talked about a role of a coach is really not to be implementing an intervention, right? We do more of the modeling of that. So we kind of did a strike through on that, and we changed it to the word modeling. So when you get into these spaces, you'll see that there's a slide number at the bottom of the slide. So when you get into your breakout group, you're going to go to whichever breakout room slide number in the bottom right-hand corner matches to your breakout room. So that's what you and the people in your breakout room will work on and have a conversation about this. And then we'll come back and talk about that together. And you don't need to worry about, this is all like locked behind. So you're not going to change anything on the background. I created that to be locked, so you can't mess with that part, but you can definitely mess around with it and be able to change where you put things and how your team makes those. So that's what we're going to do right now. So I'm going to actually put this link into the chat for you right now. And let's see, everyone should get this. Okay, and then I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to make breakout rooms for you so that you can get in there and start working on this. And I just want to make sure I make the right amount of breakout rooms for you. So everybody, hopefully you had a chance to talk with your colleagues, and I can kind of see your boards, and it looked like people were getting into some good things. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, we had previously shared with you in the chat a place for you to be able to write your thoughts in response to your curricular resource. And so I'm going to put that back in here so you can think about. So here's our note taker document that was in the chat in case you didn't get this. Some of you, I think, were coming in a little bit later. So this is where we're kind of putting reflections. We're hoping that you did have a chance to be able to share about your the person that you are going to have that commitment to, and that you are saying a public commitment to someone else. If you didn't get a chance yet, we're going to give you a chance to be able to do that now. And I'm going to just share what we would like you to think about reflecting upon. Here are some of the things that we're asking you to think about. You were thinking about roles and responsibilities, and we're asking you to think about current enabling conditions, and thinking about what might need to change or improve, and what resources or staff or time you might need, the support you might need to be able to do those things. So we want to give you a moment to make sure that you do have time to just jot that down for yourself and reflect, think about who you're going to be able to be thinking about for these different things as you spoke in your groups, and things that are challenging or things that are really going well, and who you might leverage, right? Who is an asset in your group, in your leadership group, that you're thinking, I really need to leverage that person as an asset. So just take a moment to reflect whether or not that person is, it's a particular person or a particular group of people. And so based on your breakout room discussion, just jot down some ideas and make yourself some action items that you would want to do before the December quarterly meeting, when thinking about your role as the coach, your role as the leadership team, and who you'd need to reach out to, or who are the other stakeholders that you need to be involved and engaged in this curricular work that you're doing, so that it will actually have impact and enable you to make the shifts and the changes that need to happen. So we're going to just be silent for a minute before we start talking about our next piece. Did I miss anything, Laura, with that?
Sounds good.
Okay, so people are finishing up what they're saying. I'd love to see any thoughts in the chat about what some of you may be wanting to focus on, some of the things that you feel that you really want to align yourself to and your goals going forward. So we had October, November, and December people sharing things in our first meeting space with Christy this morning, Laura. So maybe anyone who has a birthday in January, February could lead the charge in putting things into the chat, but anyone else is also welcome to do that. So we can just see, what are you aligning yourselves to and what kind of action items do you have to do to be able to do that?
Annie, I know you said it in the chat, but
That's okay. You can share. Hold on. 'Cause actually, I'm trying to, my thing isn't
okay.
showing.
I just want to say that in my breakout room, we got to talking about how this seems like a pretty simple activity, that sorting, but really it isn't. Particularly because, you know, I'm having a hard time, and I know a lot of other people do too, which it is flattering to have other people's confidence in your abilities. That's
It's
great.
also a trap.
It is a trap. And I think that when you review the elementary coaching practices and literacy standards, everything tracks. It's very clear. Like a coach is not, a coach is a person who's there to support teaching and learning. And then when you get to that last essential 7, it's sort of like, as soon as people find out that that's on the menu, it can become the whole entree instead of just like a part of the appetizer sampler, so to speak. It just, especially when, and I know we're in a teacher shortage and an administrator shortage and a dire time in Michigan with instruction, which makes the urgency of what we're doing even, you know, greater. But once you start doing some of those things, which they're all reasonable and it's there, I think the point that you're bringing forward and is really helpful for me right now when we're trying to get these things together. You know, we're working on this for my KIP and realizing, like, people know these things, but nothing's written. It's not a procedure. And then we think we know things, but then once you start looking, wow, there's a lot of holes, there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of gaps, there's a lot of assumption about what people know and what they don't know, and very small things that make a big difference. And if you don't address those, it's like you're doing the same thing year after year. And so this right now, this coach plus literacy team, or everyone, what if you don't even have the leadership team?
Right.
You know, it's either principal, teacher, or coach for everything. And so just having this visual is exactly what I need in general to say, like, okay, I've started to say, like, I don't think I'm the appropriate person to lead curriculum development for math. That doesn't, I'm happy to help you answer questions about like practices, you know, just good practices, small group instruction, whatever. But this, I think, is a good place for us to start before doing any more of that curriculum work and planning, because, you know, sometimes it's like, oh, it's PD day, everybody work on curriculum. Well, who should be a part of that, and where are they, and how do we get answers and implement things? And so thank you for this, very simple, but also not, and blast that 7th essential. It's good and bad. Thank you.
I think that's really helpful. Ashley, I've been in places where we didn't have leadership teams. That was actually a goal I wrote for myself, without saying too much, but then I wasn't actually given the autonomy to start one, because I felt like we even needed to have it at the higher level to model that. And I'm like, okay, if I can't do it here, then can we have me and someone else go in to do the trainings? Because I had gone to the school-wide trainings. Can I come in and do the trainings? Can we hire someone to do that with me to get the local people trained if they don't want it from an ISD level? Like, with local people need to know they need a leadership team, and then we do it. And so I guess the one hopefully glimmer of, I would love to give you a glimmer of hope. One is that we are rebuilding, we restarted organizational practices. We've run 2 now. We did one in April, we did one in September. Really good feedback from those. We hope to offer more at MAISA, because I literally wrote to Erin Brown every time I was coming to these sessions. I would give excellent feedback and then say, I love this so much, but what's really sad to me is I don't have any autonomy to actually be able to instantiate changes based on this, if I don't have people that understand, and it came a little bit over time, it was different schools. There wasn't enough of me to go around. One person for all 8 schools in 2,400 square miles was never set up to be successful when I was where I was, right? So like I couldn't do that. And so there's a lot of systems work we need to do. And tomorrow superintendents are coming together. They're going to make a public commitment, everybody. So think back to that hidden brain. Okay. They're going to make a public commitment to the essentials and to the work. They have done that they did it in 2016. They did it in 2019. We're doing it again tomorrow, asking Michigan superintendents of the ISDs and RESAs and ESDs to come in person. Dr. Duke is speaking and Dr. Fox-Resnick is also speaking. The goal is that they will not be able, they're going to feel the hypocrisy paradigm is my hope, and that they will commit that they're going to do this work. And if they are, that means that, I think they're spread too thin too. Okay. So this is not a judgment. This is kind of like being in a small ISD. People wore like 10 hats. That's so difficult for some of the principals in smaller rural ISDs. So this is not judgment, but it's kind of like we can't get anywhere unless we have a leadership team established. So, that is all to say that I feel your pain, but I'm appreciative that the thought process is helpful, and at least it helps you to know other people have the same issues. And here's some things we just need to know. Kind of like if you're going to teach a subject and you've never actually gone through what the vocabulary content is that children need to know, they're never going to get to access the curricular content if they still don't understand some of the vocabulary words that are necessary to even access it, like when we do real louds or whatever. So I probably talked too much. Laura, you might want to add to that too.
Yeah, well, I think what's helpful for this also is to take to connect back to what we were talking about, is to take an asset-based orientation towards yourself when you look at how many things you have been trying to do by yourself, right? And taking responsibility for yourself versus and see that and really appreciate that you are only one person or a small group of coaches, in an organization that actually needs to, where all of this is dependent on a group working together and kind of everybody's pulling in the same direction. And so really thinking about what it is appropriate for you to take on as in your current role. This is something that happens in my academic department too. I talk to Dr. Wright and I'm like, well, if I don't do this, nobody's doing this. If I don't have time to do it, if I don't do it, no one's going to do it. And she's like, then no one's going to do it. She's like, and then maybe someone will get hired to do it or someone will be assigned to do it. Right. She's like, but if you keep doing all the things, then that in some ways that can be a obstacle to getting the help that you need. And so I think that it's important to think about yourself and what you in your current role with your current resources and authority can do and what you really do need support to do.
Thanks, Laura.
Especially people in these small ISDs like you just talked about. And that makes me think of I'm putting something in the chat here and I share this every time I can, because sometimes we see things because we're the ones who are outside of the classroom. And so we can see where the holes are, or oh, well, that's an easy thing to do, or oh yeah, I could easily just help them with that. Or I've seen that in a different building. And then pretty soon when somebody or something isn't being taken care of, all of a sudden it's now I have the job of 3 people because I took on that responsibility because I was there and I saw it and somebody else didn't or whatever. And so I try to remember this little story that I was given in high school in a leadership class, but it's so true that if you don't have, just back to the whole activity, what are all of the tasks that need to be done and what are all of the roles and responsibilities of the people we have here so that we can make actionable plans of who does what, when, and why. So there's a procedure. It would just make all of the complex change so much easier. But anyway, I will stop monopolizing this, but it just really, really, really is resonating to me right now. So thank you.
I think that's because we're all teachers at heart, right? We always just do what has to be done. That's what teachers do, right? You just keep doing it until you collapse on Friday night, and we take that with us to coaching. You see something that needs to be done and you just want to do it. And like you said, now we're looking at it with this big lens and there's even more holes to fill.
I'm appreciative of both of you. And also, if you found this activity something you'd like to do again, or the the process of it. You have editing rights to that. I had to give everyone editing rights. So you can like make a copy of the slide and repeat that. If you want my actual like behind the scenes slide, email me and I can get that to you so you can change your headers or whatever. Because that I made so that you couldn't change it. So it wouldn't be as easy to do that because I didn't want it to get, accidentally confused. So anyway, we are going to think now about some of the changes in Essential 4. And so thank you everybody, and Ashley, and please anyone else feel free to put thoughts in the chat. These are hard conversations. Again, asset-based, I don't think anyone superintendent, principal, I don't think anyone wakes up and says, how can I make a literacy coach's job really difficult today? Like, I do not think that's what anyone's thinking. I think everyone's surviving, especially we have a teacher shortage and everything else. But if we don't have these hard conversations, who suffers are children, because, and that's what we're here about. And so these are hard conversations. They're difficult. And like Laura said, what autonomy, what control do we have? Even if it's just initiating that meeting with someone else who can influence more, that's important to have too. So thanks. And Laura, I
have a question.
Mhm.
How much authority do you or influence do you want to have? Like, I know what the essential says, right? But like, just as quick background, we had a consultant who recently left because he did 2 years worth of work on a selection process for curriculum materials. And then it started to feel like he was getting the nasty emails, and he was getting like for the teachers that didn't want certain programs and he was like, I'm just guiding this, like helping you to look at it and helping you to do this. And he went back to the classroom, and now there's all kinds of turmoil in that district about, well, I didn't want this and who didn't want that. And I mean, I would hate for someone to take on the blame for the program that teachers don't like.
Why you need a team, for better or for worse. I always say, like, if I were to drop off the planet tomorrow, I would want anybody on our team to know where to find all the stuff that I'm doing so that they could just, I don't think it was for first, like, God forbid I fell off the planet tomorrow. Like, I just don't exist. I want someone else to be able to know, like, where's my study group stuff? What was Annie working on? You don't want your systems to be dependent on a person. That is set up for failure. You realize why you need a team, but you need the leaders of the team to have a voice on the team.
Mhm.
So we will keep messaging that as much as we can to the people that you work with. And then hopefully they can get some, like, every person in the loop needs to have the same communication and the same understanding and the same things that they believe in, even if you don't all have the same program. Like, you don't need to all have the same program, but you need to all have the same beliefs in it. So like this, it's tricky.
Yeah, I will I will say that like this connects also with like getting input from communities and families, and like there's a difference between getting input and then like deciding who is responsible for who's going to be the face of the decision. Those are two different things. So I'm thinking about, what the curriculum team that I was a part of, we went through this long process of selecting a curriculum. There was a lot of parent voice, there was a lot of input. But ultimately our curriculum director made the final call, announced the final call, explained to the teachers that there's no perfect curriculum and this is the final call. So like it didn't, there was a person, there was some leadership assumption of that decision, even though there was also a lot of group input. And I think you want to try to find a balance between those two. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we are, this has turned out to be such a rich conversation, and I don't want to cut it off, but something did pop up in our feedback that we wanted to start engaging. I think probably continue to engage in our future sessions as well, because we know we have some example. We know we have at least one coach who has a really great example of how they've worked around this, who is willing to share a story in our future sessions. But we wanted to return to Essential 4. Tanya and I talked a little bit, Dr. Wright and I talked a little bit about the changes to Essential 4 and in the updates and why those are important. I tried to talk a little bit about how to think about this in terms of our asset-based and culturally relevant instruction, particularly around translanguaging at our August sessions. But I think what we realized is that we were skimming along somewhat like a big elephant in the room, which is which is how we have typically been introducing phonological awareness instruction into classrooms in Michigan. When I first moved to Michigan and started working with schools, there was almost no phonological awareness instruction happening in lots and lots of schools, right? And so just getting something in the door was actually a huge deal, a big lift, and everybody was very excited about it. But now I think we're in a place where we can improve and iterate, right? And there are different ways. And so we wanted to dig in a little bit deeper to Haggerty. One of the pieces of the feedback that we got is that there's this sense that like, we as researchers don't like Haggerty, or that like we don't like, we, Annie and I personally don't like Haggerty, right? And that's not that is absolutely not what we're trying to come across. We're trying to take an asset-based approach to the instructional materials that you have available to you in a district, and we are absolutely not trying to like shame or make anybody feel bad about wanting to use Haggerty. It absolutely was a huge game changer in lots of schools that I worked with when we first adopted it. But we did want to we wanted to like go into think about what this like approaching these curricular resources and alignment to the essentials looks like from an asset-based perspective towards those materials. There's no perfect curriculum, there's no perfect material, right? So we wanted to unpack some of the issues with Haggerty and think about how we could do some of this problem solving work around that. And knowing that even if you're not using Haggerty, there will be other problems that we'll have to problem solve around. But we really wanted to highlight that in the essentials really represent the best, what we know from to be best practices from research. And this phonological awareness, this update really highlights the connection of phonological awareness to letters, explicit instruction, demonstration, play with sounds and words, and engaged study of words. And then there's lots of great examples like listening to and creating variations on books and songs, sorting pictures, objects, and written words, doing activities that involve segmenting and blending, activities that, and also opportunities to write daily meaningful texts that use invented spelling. So if you can go to the next slide, Annie. We actually wanted to highlight that the end note here is really important because the explicit instruction involves telling children what you want them to know instead of just doing a bunch of activities and hoping that they infer from those activities what you want to know. So there's a really nice example of what explicit instruction in phonological awareness looks like, particularly phonemic awareness, which is, of course, the thing we're trying to highlight. Did you want to add anything to this slide, Annie? Okay, great. Let's just keep going. And I wanted to highlight this handout. I don't know how many of you have seen this before, but actually Annie made this years ago based on my training that I did on Essential for the original version. And basically this was a way of talking about what's easier and what's harder for kids, how to increase and decrease the difficulty of tasks. So there's matching, isolation, blending, segmentation, and deletion substitution tasks. And there's rhymes, syllables, onset rhymes, and phonemes. These are all different types of phonological awareness that kids can build. And they get starting from easier things and moving on to harder things. However, I sort of regret my original training. I think I mentioned this in August as well, because by presenting you with something like this, it implies that all of these things are equally important and that we need to be trying to do them all the time. Sort of similar to our last conversation, right? Everyone is not able, we're not able to do everything all the time, right? It is not necessary that we do all of these activities every day. In fact, that is not even possible in many cases. And so while it is true that this is the progression of development that you'll see in a child, it does not mean that you need to make sure that they need to spend as much equal amounts of time on all of these different activities. So in particular, the thing that we really want kids to be focusing on is blending and segmenting phonemes and words, and then matching those to letters. So blending is what helps them decode words and read. Segmenting is what helps them encode words and spell. So that blending and segmenting is actually the most important part. Deletion and substitution is harder, and it is a great assessment task, but it's not necessarily something that they need to spend a ton of time working on in instruction. Same thing with rhyme and syllables, onset rhyme. All those things are great, but they're typically a little bit easier. They typically will have mastered them earlier. So most of the work really does need to happen around phonemes. So if I had it to all do over again, I would probably like make some things bigger and smaller and kind of make it a little bit clearer that most of your instruction, particularly in these pivotal grades, K and 1, it's going to be about blending and segmenting phonemes. Does that make sense? Do you want to add anything, Annie?
I'm just grateful. I mean, also something I learned from this. So when I would speak to this document in professional learning, I would say that this is the whole point, is that you need to get to phonemes, because what happened was when I was sharing this with people and doing Essential 4, people thought they had to move through this like in a linear fashion. And so then I thought, oh my gosh. So then I had to do some retraining and say that, even though I didn't say that, you can look at this and think you have to go that way. And so we always learn how to make ourselves better to help other people, right? And so I would just then say, we always want to get to the phoneme level. And in PD, I would talk about this is the heart of the work. So Laura, you helped me think what it's just very easy, that I think there's ways we could amend this to reshare it so that it might speak to this more. But that's why when I was talking to Laura and I made this slide, I'm like, we just want people to say blending and segmenting. That's like really what we need to get to. So
yeah, maybe, this is really a model of development. Maybe we need an instructional model that we could share to sort of make it clear where the bulk of your time you'd want to spend the bulk of your time.
Yeah. So, TBD, we'll be thinking about other things. And so we wanted this is just a quick collage about different things that are already highlighted in the existing modules for Essential 4, which Laura brought up and she did in person with us. And when she's talking about playing with sounds and words, she was mentioning different things. Like these are literally just snapshots from the handouts that are with the slide decks that go with the Essential 4 modules. I did link those into the resources. They're definitely on the Wavelet. I can't remember if I remembered to link them also on the other Google Doc, but they're available to you in the facilitator guides that you'll have access to. So you can I can very easily pull up what are the bullet presentations for Essential 4. So I can pull that up and I just took screenshots, but there is this sense of playing with sound and words. And then, so if we speak to what Laura was talking about, I don't want anyone to think that we are against Heggerty. That is totally not the point. And like Laura said, people weren't doing anything. The point is, how are we going to be really critical consumers of any piece of any resource we have? Like you just saw Laura and I talk through being critical consumers of a presentation that she made and a tool I made, but I was like, whoops, we got to figure that out. That's not working right. Like that's not doing the right thing. Like I think that's what we're trying to model for you, is not to take apart one. And in fact, when Laura and I talked, she said, actually, there's a lot of good things that Heggerty does do, right? So I pulled this right out from the book. It talks about the research findings. They're right in there. It's connected to research, right? But then I also pulled out from Julia's book, right? The other piece around, we want to be connecting this to letters, which is what it says in Essential 4. And so it's not that Heggerty doesn't do great things, but there's a bunch of things that we need to consider. And so what I try to do, without trying to make anyone feel upset, because it also, one of the coaches in the last thing said they felt like a teacher who's really good at doing the Heggerty lessons. That's great. So that teacher models for other teachers, right? But like what pieces would be the best pieces to model? So, I might get hate stares, but I want to let you know, I'm trying to go at this from an asset-based approach of when we look at Heggerty, these are the things that we know around phonemic awareness instruction, phonological awareness instruction that are going to be when we think about the essentials, right? 5 minutes a day. Yep, checks those boxes from the pre-K, kindergarten, primary, and the bridge the gap, which is the grades above. The tier 1 up through grade 1, pre-K, kindergarten, you're going to notice that I have a red question mark here. And that's because when I first started coaching and people first started doing Heggerty, people were doing whole group Heggerty lessons. And I don't even know what book they were using, but 3rd grade, 2nd grade, they were doing whole group lessons that were 13 skills or something. It wasn't even 8. Like now it's like 8, but there were more before. I think it's in the old version. But when you call something primary, when I think primary, I think K2. So it's odd to me that it says pre-K, kindergarten, and not 1st grade. It says primary. And I think that that could be, if you think about Essential 7 and kind of some things, what is someone define as primary? Even though if you read the whole book, at the beginning, they put the 1st grade standards in the Heggerty book. But if you think of primary as K2, you might be doing these tier 1 with all your grade 2 kids, which is not at all what's aligned to research in terms of just having to do them each a day unless kids show that. The reason I have this as a yellow here is because bridge the gap isn't supposed to be tier 1. So I just put it as a dot because like it can't be bad or good. Like it's not intended to be is supposed to be intervention. So that's why it's kind of like an anomaly there. But when Laura was pointing out, when we put in that phonological awareness development chart, when we talk about the blending and segmenting, that's what we have, that we know that's going to be the most important part that we need kids to get to. And when she talks about the volume of practice and that we don't need to put effort in everything, but like, what do the kids show that they need? And then what's really going to make a difference in their ability to read and write, right? That's why it needs to be targeted at segmenting and blending, but it has it in there. It's an orange, not because it's not in there, it is, but it's also in there with all these other things that you do every single day. So the question becomes, do your kids need all those things every day? Do all the kids in the class need to go through all those things every day? I mean, maybe you have evidence for that, but maybe you don't. And maybe you don't know because you're just following a curriculum, right? And then the connection to letters, that just isn't happening unless it's like someone's figuring that out. So when I look at this, I think, well, there's a couple really quick things I could do to swap out and still keep Haggerty, because it's not a terrible resource that doesn't have any research that's informing it. But I, as a literacy leader in my building, might need to just help translate what that really needs to look like to support kids in the classroom and support the children that are sitting in front of me in my first grade classroom, in contrast to who the children might be in a first grade classroom next door to mine who might have different needs. So I think that's what we're trying to challenge you to do, which is not easy. And this is hard work. So the other pieces we looked at was the explicit instruction. 100%. Look at all the greens. It's very explicit. Is there a demonstration? 100%. The difference is that when Laura spoke to us years ago, it's a different handout that you may not have. It's laid out where she had us do like, what's the explicit instruction and what's the demonstration. And then the kids for the part for children being able to like practice this and do some play with it. There's a lot of demonstration, but not really a lot of play in terms of when you saw that slide before that pulled out those ways of playing that are outlined in Essential 4, that's not really captured. When we think about how the essentials describe and what we mean by play, according to research with sounds and words, that's not captured. It doesn't mean you can't figure out how to get that aligned in there. It just means it's not in there.
But I see connection between some of these things, right? The fact that they're trying to do so much in every lesson makes it difficult to spend time working with to add in the letters piece. And it makes it difficult to allow kids to have a little bit of to do a gradual release of responsibility, allow kids to play around and do it, right? It's like almost if you can, focus on just a couple of the skills and words during that your 5 to 10 minutes of Haggerty, like if you could zoom in on the blending and segmenting or zoom in on, one list of words, then you would have more time to do those things. I think these things are related, right? When you're trying to do everything, you end up doing everything in this really fast paced way that doesn't allow for some of this playfulness that we really want to see in our phonological awareness instruction. Okay. So I'm not sure we're going to have time to go back into breakout rooms today, but so I'm wondering sorry, we lost our slides. So how should we move into wrapping up, Annie? And maybe we can deepen this conversation and continue it and do the problem solving piece in our next session.
Well, we had a lot. I mean, we really wanted to have rich conversation with you and have you get a chance. I know, Laura, that you for today, she has a lot of great commitments of things she's doing. So we have our space today until 3 o'clock. So what we could do is, if you're okay with it, Laura, I can have you wrap up the things that you were going to talk about, and then I can just walk through with people the pieces that we were going to work on next. And then what we're hoping, though, is that you might be able to start to think about this. And here's what we planned that we were going to have you do in the breakout rooms was I've made Jamboards for you. So this is something that you still can do. And that's part of the work of us being able to find out who's sharing the same likes and who wants to be in what group, right? And so what we did was we found out the most the things that you mostly said you're using in your schools. And so I made Jamboards for each one of these because they showed up a lot. And so then Laura, if you want to talk through what you were going to ask people to think about for those, then that can be something that people can do as we like bring these groups together across
Yeah.
different areas.
Yeah, so I'm seeing all kinds of fabulous stuff in the chat, and this is exactly what we want to do for all of our curricular resources, not just Haggerty, but all of them, right? What are we seeing? What in these components, you know, in the phonological awareness and alphabet knowledge component, when we look at what they're doing with phonological awareness in all of these different curricular materials. These were by the way, the 8 that popped up as people being the ones that people wanted to talk about the most. So we thought we would have some breakout rooms focused on these in an ongoing way throughout all of our quarterly meetings. Basically, what are the things that they're doing really well in this area? What is the alignment with research evidence and Essential 4, these key components that Annie has pulled out for us so nicely from Essential 4? How does this align with equity and cultural responsiveness? How are we moving along that continuum towards, beyond equality toward equity? And also, how do your local teachers think about this material? Is this something that they really like and have bought into? If so, that is a huge advantage. If your teachers like Haggerty and are on board with it and are committed to it, that is something you should keep in mind. That is not something you should throw out, right? So that's absolutely part of it too. But if this is something that if this new material is something that doesn't align with their preferences, like that's going to cause other problems, right? If you're going to try to bring something in. So these are the things that we want to be thinking about around Essential 4 and eventually around all the essentials for these key materials. And I am sorry that I have to pop out early today. I have to run to another training that starts in 30 minutes for another for a school district that I'm working with on my research project. But I am looking forward to connecting with you all again soon. And I'll turn it back over to Annie to do our wrap up reflection.
Thanks for being here with us, Laura. And what I'm going to do is just show you all like what I was trying to design for us to be able to do. Laura, you're amazing. Thanks for being here. And honestly, we do want you all to be able to talk through. So what I did was make a Jamboard per each curricular resource that you're using, either as a full curriculum or it's just a resource. And so what our intent was that you can use these on your own though, right? Like even if you can't get into this in this space to start it here with the people in this group, you can pull the Jamboards that I have. You have editing rights for these. So you could think about bookworms in regard to Essential 4 was what we were focused on today. And we think about those different things that I had kind of built on that chart, right? What does phonological awareness look like? Is it tied in with letters? So you can think about, well, what are some problems that we're seeing with bookworms? Then what are some solutions and what could be some questions? So we really do want you to have the chances. And again, I just made the same type of thing for CKLA, for UFly, for all the other ones that people had mentioned that they're working on. And in fact, Katie Wolomowski was going to share with us today something she's working on in her area in Macomb where she's working, that there's some what they're trying to do around people that are using Haggerty and it's going really well, but then they have this whole new package curriculum and some of the analysis they're doing. So either Katie is going to be able to share a video with us around that, or she will be able to share that next time, which also brings me to the point that we want to hear from all of you. So our next step in our group is this, okay? We are going to, let me go here. We've created a survey for you, okay? And we want you to choose which group you want to be in. So when you look at this survey today, 1 second, and then Teresa has a good question. So when you do this survey today, there's a part where it asks you what your focus area is. So do you want to work on creating a review tool? Are you in the middle of analyzing curriculum? And Teresa, if you're trying to choose a curriculum, that you'd probably be in this analysis group where you're trying to like either analyze. Once we get into groups, then we can break into smaller groups, right? So it might be like I'm analyzing a particular curriculum, or it could be like I'm in the curricular analysis phase where I really want to be able to look through a few curriculums or curricular resources. Some people are trying to create a review tool. So for you, you could also fit yourself in there, Teresa. We want you to self-select, and then I'm asking you permission to share your email. If I have permission to share your email, I'm going to make groups of you so that you can be in community with each other in between Laura and I, like you have work you're doing every day and we only get to meet with you a few times a year. So you need each other to be able to work through some of these things. So I'm going to ask you for your permission. If it's okay, I will share it out with the group. So whoever picks problem solving, and then I'm going to give all the problem solving people each other's information, make a connection with you. And I'm actually probably going to have a meeting that you're optionally invited to come to see the other people in that group, especially if people decide they do want to use that Wakelet tool that I'm going to show to you, because if you want that, I'm going to buy a subscription for that so you can all kind of be in community around that resource together. And I also want to see how you're going to be able to, if some of you have things to share in December, I'd really like for there to be some panels of people that come and share the work that you're doing. It doesn't have to be with the whole group. It could be your own, like Macomb ISD, or right. It doesn't have to be the group of problem solving or the group of analysis tools, but really we want to hear from you because you're doing the work every day. So our role is kind of like helping you consider the asset-based coaching, helping you think about the research again. So when we get into, okay, I have too many windows open, everybody, which I'm sure you can see. There was something I was just going to share with you that's very important. The survey I had, but there was another piece we didn't get to talk to you about. And now, of course, my brain is losing that, but it'll come back. So we are going to have you fill out the survey. So I will put that in the chat for you to do at some point as soon as you can, and then I'll make your groups. Oh, that's what I want to do. I want to show you the Wakelet. So I'm going to pull that up so you can just see what that looked like. And certainly we can keep using a Google Doc, but this is what the Wakelet looks like if you hadn't had a chance to look at it. Super easy to use. I just picked a picture and then you put any website in and it just makes a whole new spot. So all the resources are here and then you can kind of drag them and move them. So what I did today for our work today, I put in Laura and Tanya's Essential 4 presentation slides that they did in August, to remind you of that. I took out the how to teach phonological awareness from the modules, that slide deck that goes with that particular module. I took out the slide deck from the Essential 4, all the bullets, and pulled that out for you. And then these pieces here, that's like the essentials document. This is just, this was actually, it says it's sign in. It's not, this is the reflection tool that I shared out for you to jot down what your thoughts are and who your commitments are to. That's what that is. So there's lots of ways that we could use this or not. This has the links to all of the videos from August. So this was me experimenting with this. If you think it's helpful, then let me know in the survey and we will buy a subscription so that everyone can use it in your groups as a way to kind of like share resources, and then you can be in community whenever else you want. So that was, you know, we have big ideas every time because we want to really be able to meet all the different things that you are looking for. But for the next time, here's what we're hoping for is that you're going to be able to fill out this survey for the focus group. We want you to follow through with thinking about that teacher that you were considering, who you're going to be asset-based around, and then start thinking about this particular group. What is it? One thing you can take from today to start to apply in your work with educators with a curricular resource that they have around Essential 4. If your focus is around Essential 5, certainly the work that we just talked about, like 4 and 5 are going together, right? When you're starting to add the letters in with that work as well. And when we think about phonological awareness is necessary to decode, and you need phonics for that, or to encode, and you need to know their sounds for that. So the optional commitments for you are you can join a focus group that you can be in synchronous conversation, or you could join a focus group to be in asynchronous chats through something like a Wakelet. And then if you think you're someone who would want to present to us, we'd love to know that so that we can start organizing that work now before December and think about something that you are working on. And my assumption is we'll try and break those down by group. So a review tool team, people that might have a review tool to share, problem solving that some people are doing, or with the analysis piece. And goodness, now my brain's like, what's our third group? I should know this like right off the top of my head, but you know, it's been one of those days. So, oh, the analysis and problem solving. So I kind of put those in together. That was a lot. And it was, you know, you all have great things to say though. So I'm glad that we did hear from you in terms of what's challenging from the leadership level. I am also going to put in the end of the day feedback form for you now because we want to hear how today went for all of you. We really do need to hear that. And then the sketch form is also going to be coming into the chat for you. So that's a lot, everybody. It's been a great day of I mean, I always take something out of it whenever I see any of our researchers, but I hope that you did as well. I'm going to put the reflection form in first. So this is a reflection on the day. Thank you all. And then the sketch form will just take me 1 more minute to get that in for you because that has not been linked yet. The last thing I'll leave up as you think about your reflections for the day, we do want to always link back to our work from Dr. Muhammad as well. And so here's some questions that you think about based on our work today. And you're all very kind. Thank you for your kind words in the chat. I do love that we can do Zoom, but man, things like breakout rooms just are much harder on Zoom than when you can just turn and talk to someone in the room. So, okay, there's your questions to think about. How did our engagement shape your identity? What were your skills that were enhanced? How did you develop your intellect today? How can your experience be used to impact the systems and structures serving education today? So that's our criticality piece. And how did this hopefully maybe add to your joy? May have added to your bringing up frustration too, but hopefully you found a little bit of joy knowing maybe some other people are in the same space with you. And one more time, I will put in the, I'll put these in one more time, and then here's our survey. So you're wonderful. I'm appreciative of every single one of you and all that you're doing wherever you are. And I'm really grateful we have each other in this space because we are very unique that Michigan has this. So keep leaning into each other. There's a lot of brilliance in every single one of these rooms that's happening right now. And we're really lucky that, you know, this is the silver lining of third grade reading law is that we became a network because of that. So thanks for being here. Keep leaning into your own assets and take care. I'm here if you have any questions.